Hi everybody, welcome to Module 4, Week 4 of our second quarter World History class. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what you're doing this week, what's in your module, and then an introduction to feudalism in Japan and Europe so that you're set up for what you're learning this week. So first thing, as always, when you're on your home page, start with your modules and go to your modules menu. Do not go to your to-do list, don't go to your calendar, don't go to the list view, don't go to the grade book, because those things aren't built to show you how to move through this. You always need to go to the modules page so you can see how your teacher has built this module for you and you can go through it in order. Okay, so first thing, let's go to the pacing guide and take a look at that. Okay, so this week, Step 1, watch the introduction video. Check, you're doing it. Nice job. You can just check that off when you printed this out. Then you're going to click on the Japanese feudalism chart. There's a chart for you to read. You're going to learn a lot of vocabulary about Japanese feudalism. Then you're going to watch a really cool, pretty short samurai video, learn a lot about samurai. When you finish that up on Wednesday, you'll take a short quiz on Japanese feudalism. Then on Thursday, this is where I want you to pay close attention. We're doing something called the Trial of Genghis Khan. You're going to complete part 1 on Thursday. That includes reading an article, so you can read it on your own or you can just listen to the recording of it. And watch the video, wait for it, the Mongols. It's a crash course world history video. So you'll do those two things and that will give you the information you need to fill in part 1 of the Trial of Genghis Khan. You'll go through those. Once you're done with that, make sure to take the quiz that's called I Actually Read This and Watched This quiz. Really quick quiz just to show us that you did that work so that you're ready for BC on Friday, which is where we'll do the bulk of the Genghis Khan trial together. If you remember back to last quarter, we did the trial of Justinian. It's set up sort of the same way where you'll do the first piece and then we'll go through the rest of it together in class. On Monday, you're going to wrap everything up with the Mongolian rule in East Asia 321 discussion. Okay, so let's take a look at those things in the module. Okay, so the module we've broken up into 3 subject areas. The first is feudal Japan, so I'm going to give you the introduction to that today. Then you'll look at those learning materials that are in here, take that very brief quiz, show us what you know, then learn about Genghis Khan. He's really cool, guys, so I really hope you enjoy this. Really interesting part of history. You'll complete part 1 only, then take the quiz that proves that you did that, and then come to class and we'll finish the rest of the Trial of Genghis Khan. Then you'll wrap up the unit by learning about the Yuan dynasty. It's this really cool kind of outlier dynasty of Mongol rule in China and how that related to Japan at the time. And then we'll wrap up the unit with a discussion, a 3-2-1 discussion board. Please make sure to follow the directions. And it is a discussion board, guys, so you need to make sure that you post and then you'll see everybody else's and then reply to somebody else. But please make sure you will get a 0 if you put in an empty post or like a gobbledygook post so that you can see other people's posts. These are your thoughts. If you've watched the short video, if you've done the materials for this unit, tell us your thoughts. It's not something that you need to copy from somebody else or put in blanks. If you do any of those, you'll get a 0 for that unit. So just make sure to put in your own thoughts. It shouldn't be anything that you're not prepared to be able to do. Okay, so that is your module for this week. Let's take a look at what will lead you into this. I'm going to show you a little bit about feudal Europe and Japan, how we can compare the two. So we have to go back to quarter 1 and just review what we learned there because now we're comparing. Okay, if you'll remember in quarter 1, we learned about feudalism in Europe and there was the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So the central government was gone and it was like a post-apocalypse. Everybody just dispersed. They spread out and were scattered all over the land and just had to figure out how to survive. So they went out to the fields and the rural areas and just sort of set up what they could. So they set up little farms, but they're all scattered. They're all far apart from each other. And they start to sort of collect together. And some people might be traveling around the land trying to figure out what to do, and they run into somebody else who has something set up. And that person says, oh, okay, you want to eat and you want some shelter. Well, you take this bit of land and you farm it for me, and you get to eat and you get to live there, but you also have to give me your loyalty and part of what you get from the land. So people, it's a pretty good situation for these people compared to what they were coming from. Okay, so that, if you'll remember back to Ms. Blaney's lecture from first quarter, is called the web of obligations, because everybody's tied together in this web. So the people on the farms are tied to the Lord because it's the Lord's land, but the Lord is tied to them as well because his job is to protect these people who are doing the farming and the working for him, and to supply them with their food and their land. So that builds more and more. The lords become more and more powerful. They gather more land. They have armies, and eventually we have a form of centralized government. We get kings of larger and larger lands, and they build nations, and eventually we have a national identity. And Europe comes to look something like it does today. So these sort of areas that build into what we see today. That's feudalism in Europe. So these lords that have all these peasant farmers working for them on their land. Okay. Here's the pyramid of all the social structure. Up top, we have the king, of course. Under him, the church officials and the nobles. Then this is where we're going to spend some time focusing today, is the knights. The knights are the fighters, the protectors, sort of the army for the king and the nobles who protect the land. Under them are the peasants. These are the people who are working the land, who are really doing all the business of making the society work, okay, or that little nation making it work. And we'll see in the next slide, you really need to break up these peasants into two different groups, and another group under the peasants called the serfs. These are people who aren't quite slaves, but they don't really have much going for them more than a slave would. They do have a choice whether to be there or not. They're not property legally, but they don't have really any options. So it really isn't much better of a life for them. In Japan, here's what we see what's going on with their feudalism. Okay, so Japanese feudalism, at the top, we have an emperor, okay, so similar to the king. Under him are the daimyo and the shogun, who's not on here, but we'll see them on the next one. Under there, and this is where we'll spend some time today, as well as the samurai. They're sort of like the knights. They're the protectors, the army, the fighting force that protects the land. Then under them, the groups that are really holding things together and getting all the real work done, the peasants, the merchants, and the artisans. Okay, here are those two groups side by side. So the Europe, feudal society in Europe next to feudal society in Japan. We have the king, which is like the emperor. The lords are like the shogun and daimyo. The knights are like the samurai. That's where we're going to focus the most today. Knights here. Okay, take a quick look at that and see how it compares. Okay, now if you are a king or an emperor or a lord or a daimyo, you have to have a fighting force to enforce rule in your land and make sure that you get to stay in charge. But the problem is, how do you make sure that those people don't take over your role? Okay, so if you're a knight and you're really strong and powerful and you've got all the weapons and you've got all the know-how and how to use those weapons, then why wouldn't you just take over and get the land for yourself and do the ruling? Well, they don't do that because they have these codes of honor, and these codes that tell a samurai or a knight how to act. In Europe, the knights have the code of chivalry. This is courage in battle, loyalty to a lord, generosity to the feeble, defense of the church. They must champion a lady. In Japan, they have the Bushido Code. This is also courage in battle, loyalty to your shogun or daimyo. Remember, that's the lord in Japan. Kindness, education, and supporting the arts. Right. This is the code of chivalry for knights in Europe, described in the Song of Roland. It's kind of cool that we have this, but I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. You can come back and read it. It's kind of cool because it's in oldish English, so some of the spellings are funny. And so we see the things that they're required to do: to serve the liege lord in valor and faith. Okay, so your liege lord is the person in charge of you. Make sure you serve that person. Protect the weak and defenseless. They are a protection force, right? Give succor to widows and orphans. Take care of the women and the children. Refrain from the wanton giving of offense, and to live by honor and glory. To despise pecuniary reward. Pecuniary means money. So this is saying that they're not doing this for money. You're doing this for honor because this is what knights do. This is your code. Okay, so you don't have to worry about them getting too much money either because they're not doing it for money, right? The pecuniary reward. Fight for the welfare of all, to obey those placed in authority. To eschew unfairness, meanness, and deceit. At all times to speak the truth. And never turn the back upon a foe. So there's these rules about bravery and you're not greedy. You're doing this for honor because you love your land, you love your lord, and you're going to serve that lord. Okay, all right. So think about that for a second, about the things that are important for these men to do, that protect their land, that protect the people in charge. And we're going to compare that to the Bushido Code that the samurai live by in Japan. And I'm going to go out of this so we can interact with it a little bit. It's pretty neat. Okay, so the Bushido Code consists primarily of 7 virtues that all samurai must live by. And we can select each of these and learn about each one. So the first is rectitude, constancy, and good judgment. Courage, physical and moral bravery. Honesty, truth-telling. Now, both of those, we've seen all of these in the European code, right? In the chivalry code. It was, you had to tell the truth. You had to be brave in battle. Benevolence, kindness, generosity, and altruism. But yet, altruism means doing something for something else that you don't get the benefit from it. You're helping somebody else. So similar to chivalry as well. Honor, praiseworthiness, due respect, and integrity. So this is a code of honor. You have to have honor. You have to stick to it. Respect, high regard, deference, fealty. And the last one, loyalty, unswerving allegiance and fidelity to your shogun or daimyo. Right, so these hold them in check pretty well. And it holds a code of honor. But you'll see that the system in Japan, the feudalism, kind of fell apart, and you'll see the problems that ends up causing because they have this force of soldiers, of these very highly skilled samurai who now need something to do, and the lords are a little bit troubled about that. You may have heard of samurai in a lot of popular media. They show up in a lot of like movies. There's I can't remember what it's called, 47 Ronin, I think. In Princess Mononoke, there's a character that's a Ronin, which means a samurai who doesn't have a lord and just sort of travels the land doing what he can, getting jobs that he can. lots of places and lots of anime shows. There are these sort of Ronin or samurai-like characters that show up. They're like super soldiers and just really know their stuff and they're really good. So you may have seen all of these characters of samurai, and so there's this sort of, just like knights are the reason we go to like Renaissance fairs or something. They're this sort of legendary mythological idea of them, but they really were real people, and they were held in check by these codes, which is really interesting because it showed up in both places. Okay, so that's all I have for you for now, guys, but make sure to continue on through the module, and don't forget to do part 1 of the Trial of Genghis Khan for VC on Friday, because we will do the rest of the parts together. And make sure to contact your teacher if you have any questions. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good week.